We are now joined by a guest. We start off with Yossi Kupawasa, who's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, live from Tel Aviv. Yossi, thank you very much for joining me. Reports coming out of the US, at least, is that a ceasefire deal is close. If that's the case, why are the Israeli strikes continuing to hit northern Gaza? We've seen a school has been struck within the last 24 hours, with over 25 deaths recorded.
Well, good afternoon. We don't attack schools. The situation in Gaza is that schools and other civilian facilities are being used by Hamas as headquarters and positions for the terror operatives. And we attack the terror operatives after making efforts to make sure that the collateral damage will be minimal. And that's what's happening for quite a while. They keep using pharmacies, hospitals, whatever, in order to hide and believe that this can give them some immunity, which it doesn't. And the war in Gaza goes on. That's why we are talking about a ceasefire. We want to see a ceasefire that would make sure that our hostages will come back home, and that's the main purpose of ceasefire from our point of view. We have to remember that this is all following what happened on 7th of October 2023, when we had 250 Israelis abducted by Hamas and 1,200 killed, massacred. So that's where we stand, and we have to make sure that with our operations we don't suffer more terrorism from this group dominating Gaza.
Yossi, in terms of Hamas, they've mentioned that 34 hostages could be released in a potential ceasefire deal. In Israel, and as an Israeli, does that go far enough?
So it's the first stage that goes enough. We are talking about 34 living hostages that have to be released in the first stage of this deal. The question mark is about how clear is the second stage. First stage is more or less agreed upon, but the question is what kind of relationship is there between this first stage and the next stage, because we want to make sure that all the hostages are going to come back home safely. Definitely those who are still alive. We have more than 30 out of 98 that are still in the hands of Hamas. More than 30 are dead, probably. And we don't know the fate of all the others. Some of them are living and some of them are unclear. The situation is unclear. That's where we stand, and we hope that all of them will be released.
We're also joined by Professor A.K. Pasha, an international affairs expert. Professor Pasha, thank you for joining us. Looking at the situation in Lebanon between Hezbollah and Israel, there has been a ceasefire that is held. Do you think any potential ceasefire deal that is struck between Hamas and Israel will follow a similar path? And do you think it will be similar in the way that Israeli forces will retreat slowly?
The Israeli-Lebanese conflict played up because Hezbollah was demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. And since Hezbollah took a heavy toll, and there was pressure not only from the United States, France, and other Western countries, but also interested regional parties, also Arab countries, put pressure on Hezbollah to agree for a ceasefire. Whereas in Hamas, you see, the Hamas has shown flexibility on a number of occasions, at least 3, if I recall. Just before the American elections, we were told that it is very near, and before that also. But the stumbling block was the Israeli Prime Minister, who would raise any number of issues like the Philadelphia corridor or dismantling of the Hamas to end the war, and all sorts of excuses the Israeli Prime Minister was highlighting. So with the result, and also his personal agenda about the court cases and corruption cases, so on and so forth. So now that the new American president is going to take charge, and he had fixed January 20 as the de facto deadline, and more importantly, Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, also has been playing a very important role to get this ceasefire deal, along with Biden's envoy, Brett McGurk. So all these two, plus the Mossad chief and Shin Bet chief, Egyptian intelligence chief, and the personal involvement of Qatari Prime Minister have all been pushing very hard, and it is for the first time that Hamas says the outlook is very promising and that the gaps were being narrowed. And there is a big push, in fact, towards an agreement if all goes well to the end, as they say. So in that way, there is some hope for optimism. But Hamas wants a permanent end to the war and Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza and release of the Palestinian detainees. So these are the sticking points. Israel wants all the hostages which Hamas has taken to be released, whereas Israel doesn't want to release all the thousands of Palestinians who are detained, and large number from the West Bank since the October 23 issue happened in this region. So in that, the maximalist demand from Israel had been torpedoing the deal, ceasefire deal, even though Biden was claiming that we are putting pressure, which was not really a pressure. It was just a smoke screen to enable the elections smoothly for the return of Kamala Harris as the president. So in that way, now that the deadline has been fixed by Donald Trump and he has said a deal has to be done. So Netanyahu is under pressure to oblige, and hopefully this time threat from Trump would materialize, and he will start his new administration with a clean slate to focus more on other issues like Iran, consolidating the temporary ceasefire on Lebanon, and other hotspots which are growing in the Middle East.
Professor A.K. Pasha, I apologise to interrupt you. We are unfortunately out of time. Thank you also to Yossi Kupawasa for joining us.